Speaking of white people in 2004, let's talk about Naruto.
Welcome to Season 6, where we're phoning it in.
You don't think critically and then put a Pop-Tart into your body. I am highly caffeinated and minorly concussed.
Aruga! Aruga!
What came first, the love sack or the gravity gun?
It's my turn to do a sin with Sonic.
This is for the freaks.
Too much piss. That's the kind of bad decisions we like to hear about. Love me a sleepy-ass bat.
How much shrimp can you fit in your mortal body?
You told me you guys would be cool.
That's Season 6 intro material right there.
Hello and welcome to Debate This, the show where no one is right but someone is definitely wrong. In this show, we take time out of our busy adult lives to talk about comic books, video games, and how nothing has made me want to play Alan Wake more than the Game Awards did when they featured a 4-minute Broadway-style performance of an original song and dance. Have you guys seen that yet?
No? What are you
I
talking
have not
about?
seen a single second of the Game Awards.
Also same.
Jeff Keighley's Game Awards happened a couple days ago of this recording, Thursday the 7th of December, and it's like kind of the new big event in gaming. Now that E3 is torched, more or less.
It's all we have.
It's all we have. So there's Summer Game Fest, and then there's the Game Awards, and which are both Jeff Keighley joints. And this past Game Awards, the one that they just aired, there was obviously Baldur's Gate 3 ran away with everything because it's a masterpiece of a game. It's the greatest game ever made. But part of this was much like in the Oscars, how they do performances. The Alan Wake team did a live performance of a song from Alan Wake 2, and like the game creator was like up on stage dancing with a bunch of actors. It was like kind of fun, but it was all over Twitter. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's fun.
Right.
Everything I've heard about the Game Awards was no one got to do anything fun except Anthony Mackie got to talk for like 15 straight minutes.
Oh yeah, because they announced season 2 of Twisted Metal.
Really?
Is that what that was?
Yeah, that's what that was. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Also, I have written here that and 2014's Deadly Daycare, starring Christy Carlson Romano, are the two things that are driving me toward being an eventual Alan Wake fan.
That's not anything.
Tune in next year to see Andrew
Tune in next year to see
stream
the
Alan
progress.
Wake on Twitch.
Yep.
Probably.
So I'm just going to jump in because today's flavor text is going to be a bit different from our normal A to Z about a certain game or franchise formula. And this came about because I was talking with today's commissioner at Sharkbait on Discord. And they asked me if I had ever looked into why religion is such a common trope in anime and Japanese games. And I joked about the trope that we all used, we all use here about killing God with the power of friendship in anime. And that kind of led to the topic, the question that we're going to answer in today's thesis, which is, why do we always kill God with the power of friendship?
A question many are asking.
Everyone's asking all the time, always.
That's how this would start if it was a clickbait article. A question that everyone is asking today is, why are we killing God with the power of friendship?
So to understand why religion seems to be such an influence on Japanese media, we have to start at the beginning. That's right, nerds. Today we're doing a good old-fashioned history lesson, an IRL history lesson.
Blah, 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 blah.
The thing people love to come to podcasts for.
Yep. I beg to disagree with your sarcasm based on the sheer amount of history-based podcasts,
That's
Thomas.
fair.
You make a good point, yeah.
One was among your most listened to podcasts, Todd. You showed us. Behind the Bastards is your top podcast.
No, I realize. The other thing I don't want to miss here is that Andrew prompted us with a question and didn't say the answer may surprise you, which makes me think that the answer will not surprise
The
us.
answer super will not surprise you.
The answer is very tame and and very expected, yes.
Now, folks, sitting front row and distracted by the warm hum of my outdated overhead slide projector are my fellow students, Todd, Shinra, Thomas, Kyle, Genova, Harper, and Matt Sephiroth Cole.
Oh, I know that last one.
You know that last one.
This is all Final Fantasy.
They're all Final
Yeah.
Fantasy bosses.
They're all Final Fantasy VII antagonists, but they have to do with our main topic today. Now, before we get started, I do want to shout out the video essay that uniquely inspired this episode and really served as the main framework, which was originally sent over our Discord by @ChrissyLynn earlier this year, back in June, I believe. And that video is called quite literally, why do you always kill gods in JRPGs? The user is Moon Channel, and I will link the video in the show notes. It's a very good video. It's about an hour and a half, and I'm going to go through the major beats of that video.
Don't come for us, H-Bomber guy.
Don't come for us, H-Bomber guy. I have already sourced my material here. Okay, so normally when we do these, we go around and say, what do you already know about this topic? Instead, I would like everybody, without reading ahead, to guess who the big bad of today's discussion is. Kyle, would you like to go first? Since I think you were about to answer a little bit ago.
Who the big bad of it is?
Who is our big bad of today?
American imperialism and the scientist Oppenheimer.
Okay,
they're my two solid guesses.
Hey, solid guess.
I want to go last because I think I was drinking with Andrew yesterday, and I think I might have heard him yell the answer.
You may have heard me yell the answer.
Okay, fair. Let me ask you this question. Maybe this is out of line, so if you don't want to give me this answer, that's fine. But can you give me like a range of where in history we're talking about? Like, can you give me like a starting point?
We are literally going to start at 1000 BC and then end up in modern day, present day.
Oh, okay. Then my guess is Christianity.
Okay, good guess. Ooh. Good guess.
When Todd said he might know the answer, that's where my head went too.
Yeah.
So. It was either Christianity or it was American imperialism in the scientist Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Do you want to say what you think you heard?
Yeah, because I think the end of those. So see all of the above, I think, is kind of the answer because it's, if I recall Andrew saying it way too loud yesterday, capitalism, I think, will be the villain today, which is just what you both said put together under one blanket.
What is not Christianity and American imperialism with the scientist Oppenheimer, if not capitalism?
That's kind of the like going into your like Sunday school class and writing Jesus loves us forever answer though.
It sure is.
So it's always the bad guy's always capitalism.
To tie it all together, much like Shinra, Genova, and Sephiroth are all antagonists to Final Fantasy VII, those three ideals that you mentioned are antagonists to today's episode. So great job.
Wonderful.
They're the mini bosses
They are the mini bosses. The power creep, if you will. All right, guys. So we're gonna start all the way back in ancient Japan. So this is predating, 1000 BC. And understand Eastern religion, we got to start with Chinese Taoism. It's spelled with a T, Taoism, but it's pronounced Taoism, which has work recorded as early as around 1000 BC. That's where we're starting. So Taoism is both. Any of you guys know much about Taoism?
Oh yeah, dude! I had to read the Tao of Pooh in high school.
I know. I was.
It's a real Siddhartha kind of move. Yeah.
I know pop culture Taoism. Because I've also read the Tao of Pooh.
Which is mostly what you need to know for today's discussion.
Yeah.
And I'll place myself in the bronze medal recipient of these three.
We've all had a pothead roommate or have been that pothead roommate at one point. So Taoism, for those who don't know, is both a religion and a philosophy. It's all about living in harmony with the Tao, or the natural way of the universe, also known as, you could define as, reality itself. It's all very inward-looking, inward-facing, centers on the idea that your world is shaped by your perceptions and how you interact with it.
It's the Force.
It's the Force.
It's what the Force ripped off. Yeah.
Honestly, I think it best represents Eastern mysticism, or like the idea of Eastern mysticism, or how the West developed Eastern mysticism.
Sure.
Now, Taoism is still practiced today in China and in many other surrounding countries, Asian countries. Even in the West, we have the New Age movement, which, like I said, is very much Eastern mysticism inspired by the tenets of Taoism, along with other Eastern religions. Another ancient Chinese religion, Confucianism, was popularized around its themes of climbing the divine ladder and ascending to godhood. And then finally, we've got Buddhism, which originated in India but quickly made its way east, and it was very popularized in China as well. Follows similar threads, but focuses on one's own personal enlightenment and journey to achieve nirvana. So we've got three religions which all have very similar themes. They have different names, they have different concepts, but similar themes. A fun little note here is Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball, not DBZ. Dragon Ball is actually a light retelling of a 16th century Chinese novel called Journey to the West. which is very much rooted in Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. So
I did know Dragon Ball was going to be a big through line today. So there's a lot of it. I've heard the comparison of like these Eastern religions to Western religions. Of Western religions kind of focus on like the answer, quote unquote, is outside us, and Eastern religion focuses on like the answer is inside us.
So I want that's a really good point that Kyle dwelt, and I want you guys to sit on that point for a second, because that's going to be really important as we go through how religion shaped Japan, and how religion shaped Japan throughout the centuries, and how that's kind of iterated today. So we'll come back to that point. Okay.
I'm getting my gold stars today.
You're getting your gold stars. So, like I said, a lot of these, as mentioned before, these are all individualistic concepts, but these religions were all pantheistic, meaning there is divinity to everything in the world, essentially. You know, think paganism, right? Where deities are intangible forces of nature, versus your single monotheistic like Christianity, or even like Greek Roman gods, like where they, you know, Zeus and Poseidon and things like that. Okay, so meanwhile, we go to now ancient Japan. Ancient Japan developed a lot later than ancient China. The written language was adopted later in China, and the first recorded ruler of Japan was around 500. I think that's 500 BC. I haven't incorrect in my notes. The first recorded ruler of Japan, recorded as Queen Himiko, adopted Chinese Taoism and Buddhism around 500. That might be 580.
It is AD.
Thank you. So Taoism's idea of ascension and immortality ran as a strong theme, and then mixed with Japan's own native beliefs at the time to create their first kind of official native religion, Koshin. Now, Koshin is a mostly dead religion. We're not going to talk about it much, but it does live on in the imagery of the three monkeys: see no evil, speak no evil, and hear no evil. That's where that comes from. So this first image in our imager library, and I will state here, as we usually do with these flavor texts, there is a small imager library. The links are in the show notes. If you're following along, not driving, please feel free to check it out and follow along on the pictures. So image one is a very real snap of a temple in Japan that still depicts the three monkeys from Koshin. So for today's discussion, Koshin's really only important because it eventually involved in what we know as Shinto or Shintoism today, which is Japan's dominant religion as we know it. From Shintoism comes Japan's creation myth, which is the country's oldest recorded document. And the creation myth, while again, think the Greek myth, you know, it's very much folklore. It's not like God created the world in 7 days, right? It's more of a Greek myth kind of deal.
It's understood that this is a myth. It's not. It's
understood that this is a myth, not God pooped out accepted. Dinosaurs and people in 7 days.
Well, the ark was big, Andrew. They built a replica in Kentucky using tax dollars. Let's all be cool.
Our agnostic to atheist pipeline in this podcast in these 7 years has been quite a journey.
We'll all be respectful, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Only mild blasphemy will be committed today.
No, everyone just own your blasphemy. It's not the official stance of Debate This HQ.
2024 is the year of owning your blasphemy.
Man, that's a hard line.
That's good. That's really good. Somebody put on a t-shirt. Okay, so back to Japan's creation myth. The myth states that a series of 17 deities were formed from the creation of the heavens. You've got the 5 genderless deities and then 12 or 6 pairs of male god and goddesses. And they all acted as the progenitor deities, aka the kami, Kami. Now, these kami birthed more like minor deities who represented the various forces of nature and reality. I looked at this and I was like, holy shit, that's Pokemon.
Somewhere around the 5th or 6th generation, Pokemon stopped being like, let's adapt everything from Shinto into a cute animal collecting game. But it's definitely there.
Yep.
And
yeah. So among the major deities were a few named Izanagi and Izanami, which are considered you can consider the Zeus and the Hera, the progenitor deities. These are, I would say, one, this is Arceus in Pokemon, but two, Izanagi and Izanami are featured very heavily, along with a lot of the other gods. They're featured heavily in the Shin Megami Tensei series, which includes Persona. Image 2 features Izanagi as adapted in Persona 4, and I added him because Izanagi is essentially like your signature persona in Persona 4, the main protagonist, kind of like the magician guy is in Persona 5 that you guys know from Smash Brothers exclusively.
Okay, so go back for a second, because I'm having a hard time drawing the line between this and Pokemon, and I think it's because I don't really know enough Pokemon deep lore.
Kyle, do you want to take that?
If I can try, and Andrew, correct me, it's more of the there are deities and spirits for every elemental force and and like aspect of our life than it is the specific these are the 12 named deities that everyone who follows Shinto knows about. And it's more the at-home aspect of it, of like everything in your house has a spirit, has
pretty much
divinity to it.
Cool.
That's more the Pokemon connection.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Amaterasu is the goddess of the sun, and if you ever played 2006's Okami, that game is a retelling of Amaterasu's story from folklore. That image from Okami, Amaterasu is the main character in Okami. That's image 3. That's the white wolf that you've probably seen somewhere.
Is it a white wolf in like Shinto?
No,
okay,
just Amaterasu is just a goddess.
Is this a play off of Ninetales as well? Like the Pokemon that
the nine-tailed fox is very much a folklore thing that's different, but you're on the money for sure.
Okay,
I will jump in because I don't know where I'll have a better spot here
please.
too. A lot of my familiarity with this is also going to come from Magic: The Gathering. They did the Kamigawa set was a pretty good but still whitewashing of Shinto. They did their best for a team of white people in 2004, but that's my another touchstone I'll have here is they adapted a lot of this into that set.
Speaking of white people in 2004, let's talk about Naruto. So,
what a sentence.
There's a lot of these stories, and I'm not going to go into, but one of them is the mighty warrior Susanoo, who's kind of like Hercules in this folklore. Susanoo defeated the evil Yamada no Orochi, who was an 8-headed serpent demon, and this entity appears in a lot of various forms. Yeah. For example, the main antagonist in Naruto for those first couple arcs, Orochimaru.
Oh yeah.
So he is image 5. Image 4 is the mighty warrior Susanoo, as depicted in Final Fantasy XIV, critically acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV, because obviously
the whole like major heroes of lore fighting giant snakes or hydras. It's
good stuff.
I get it. Like it's
I really love the imagery that like populates across religion, because the snake is always this type in everywhere it shows up.
It's one of those things where all of these, like when you start to learn about all these cultures, like at first they seem so foreign, but the more you dig, and I think we're gonna find that a lot here too, is just like it's so similar. It really is. Like
it's the same thing through a different cultural lens. It's like this is very diminutive, but like it's like dumplings versus pierogies. Like they're it's a common meal. It's stuff wrapped in dough and steamed. Like, but they're their very own, very specific thing.
All right. So by the 8th century, the various tribal states of Japan were all following a mix of Shinto, Buddhism, and Taoism. And soon these different dogmas would lead to a sort of feudal system where the noble elite wielded their own versions of Buddhism for political power. Again, sound familiar? Yeah. So this resulted in several wars being fought between these tribes, fighting for their different variations of Buddhism, because it wasn't like Christianity where it was one singular kind of thing. It was all of these different variations of dogmas.
That's what Christianity is known for. Every Christian in the world agreeing on,
that's fair,
on dogma.
Yeah. Well, I mean back in the Crusades era, but yeah, you're right. You're right. Fair enough. So armies were led by warrior monks of the nobility class, and this period of civil war would go on until about 1192, which marks the era of the shogunate. So 1192. This is where we get the period of time known as feudal Japan, formally. 1192 marked the beginning of the first shogunate, the Kamakura shogunate, and this period was a unification of the country under the shogunate, which was like military rule, essentially. This is also where we get the emergence of the samurai, which is a ruling class. So, think like the Knights Templar in the Crusades. Like these are both nobles, but also knights.
The generalities are not too different if you know what feudal Europe was like.
Very similar.
The knights were nobility in feudal Europe. They had owned land, had people work for them. So too did the samurai. The code of chivalry and the code of the samurai aren't terribly different.
And the fact that, like, again, all of this was being influenced by religion, and they were fighting over religion, right? Like that's kind of at the center here. So now keep in mind the rule of the shogunate would actually last all the way through 1868. So past through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. However, there would be several periods, and for several periods of shogunate, different dynasties, essentially, and all of these are kind of like bookmarked by periods of more civil war. So again, not a great time. So we've got, after the Kamakura shogunate, you've got the Ashikaga shogunate and the Tokugawa shogunate, among others. So at this time, Buddhism expanded to become the dominant religion among the nobles, the samurai, and then eventually the commoners. And this is where I want to go back to Kyle's earlier point of the difference of inward religion versus outward facing religion. So as the commoners started adopting Buddhism, they were looking at these tenets of ascension and self-enlightenment and the idea that, like, hey, you yourself can become a god. What happens when commoners realize that they can improve their own stature? They revolt.
Yeah.
Fucking metal, dude. So we see a series of literal peasant uprisings during this period. And
good for them.
Good for them. Unfortunately for them, this movement was crushed by a series of 3 samurai warlords who would eventually become deified in what would become Shinto. You've got Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Now, those names may or may not sound familiar, specifically Nobunaga. If anyone who's played Dynasty Warriors or the real-time strategy series Nobunaga's Ambition, you may have heard these warlords. Or not. So a series of unrest quelled the uprisings and culminated in the Edo period of peace, which started in about 1603. And this marked the last era, the last chapter of the samurai and the shogunate rule. Now, you guys may remember when we talked about Demon Slayer, the anime, a couple years ago. We actually talked a little bit about the Edo period, which is very much the period of Japanese culture that I think everybody thinks of. It's the temples, it's the kimonos, it's the, all of the like very classic Japanese stuff, right?
Like if you think of America in the past, you think of like the frontier. If you think of Europe in the past, you think of knights and dragons. Same.
This is also like the Renaissance for Japan. This is where we get, the painting of the Great Wave, right?
Right.
We all know that. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So part of this period was that Buddhism was now being cracked down upon and brought down by the nobility, who were now all in on Shinto. So again, your parallels to Renaissance era England, we're Catholic, we're Protestant, we're Catholic, we're Protestant, right? Again, it's all the same shit. Meanwhile, so during this time, it's during the Renaissance. So we've got Western explorers, and in 1543, 2 Portuguese explorers accidentally found themselves in Japan and would become the very first 2 Westerners to set foot on the island. A few years later, a Portuguese Christian missionary arrived in Japan to start converting people, because that's what Christian missionaries do.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yep. So ring your bells for those of you that have them. So the entire, like I said, this entire period of shogunate rule was there's a lot of parallels to medieval Europe. However, the shogunate period of Japan did not progress in the 1600s to the level of the West. So at this point, by the 17th century, Japan economically and technologically was a lot more inferior to the West.
I had heard, and I don't know that the source on this is 100% reliable. I'd heard that the main difference here is that by this time, Europe had proto-capitalism or capitalism, and Japan didn't. So there was the countries in Europe were competing to out progress each other.
Europe had naval fleets.
Yeah,
that was they had slave labor, right? So all of those things definitely. So the rapid expansion and industrialization in Europe was not happening on this side of the world.
Where Japan's like isolationism was kind of they didn't feel the need to compete against anyone else. They were keeping to themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And so actually that is exactly what happened. And quickly after Christianity started to spread, the Shinto nobility very quickly outlawed it, as well as Buddhism. And this outlaw kind of expanded and led to a strict ban on people from leaving or entering the island at all. So this is where we get that first taste of very, very strict isolationism, as Kyle mentioned. This was also, and this is the fall of the shogunate. So people losing power do what they tend to do, which is everything that they can to retain that power.
Right.
So they start enacting these draconian rules, these ineffective policies, essentially just completely torpedo the economy. And by the 1800s, the shogunate was to be completely dispelled. Interestingly enough, the final nail in the shogunate's coffin was a man named Commodore Matthew Calbraith Perry of the United States Navy. Commodore Perry from the beer.
Yeah.
Are they one and the same?
They are one and the same.
This is wild to me because I have, when you do this, the notes that we can kind of like follow along with, and then the Imgur.
Yep.
Yeah. And I saw picture 6 in the Imgur.
Yep.
You sure did.
And didn't lead ahead in the notes. And I was like, but how? And where?
I have also been wondering how we got to Great Lakes Commodore Perry.
one of my favorite Great Lakes beers.
Yeah.
I mean, I put 2 and 2 together. I'm just very shocked that they're the same Perry. I thought same Commodore. I thought it was I thought it was an odd coincidence, not a like, oh no, it's the same guy. Good.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So anyone listening who doesn't live in the Great Lakes region, there is a regional brewery, series of breweries called Great Lakes, and one of their signature beers is called Commodore Perry IPA. It's pretty good. Hey everybody, Andrew here. Okay, so quick errata. The Great Lakes Commodore Perry IPA is not actually based on Matthew Calbraith Perry. It is instead named after his younger brother, Oliver Perry, who was also a naval commander and who also happened to be serving around this time, but is most known for earning the title the Hero of Lake Erie which, I mean, it makes a lot more sense. Something he fought at the Battle of Lake Erie, which is a lot more Ohio lore than you probably were looking for or needed today. But there you go. Oliver Perry is Commodore Perry's IPA, not Matthew Perry. Great. Thank you. Yeah, so Commodore Matthew Perry, which I also find was pretty funny. Good.
I thought that was the guy from Friends.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was the guy from What We Do in the Shadows.
You got one more in there?
I'm good.
All right.
No.
Great.
That's restraint.
That's restraint. Commodore Perry arrived at the shores of the capital of Edo, because this is the Edo period at the time, with an armada. And this was an armada very much meant to forcibly open the trade routes under direction from none other than President Millard Fillmore at the time. Now,
what do you
Commodore
mean
Perry,
none other than Millard Fillmore is not exactly an infamous president.
Famous war criminal Millard Fillmore.
Millard Fillmore, yeah, is mostly known for having the name Millard, right? But was a war criminal.
Yeah. Do y'all know a lot about the Mexican-American War and how basically, like, in order to start the Mexican-American War, the American troops literally just stood at the border throwing rocks at people and was like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it sounds right.
Yeah, right. So Commodore Perry arrived with an armada, right? And to do this exact thing, but in water with boats. And they just stood there pissing people off and said, yo, we're going to come back in a year. You better let us in a year. So
great.
Cool. Yeah, love that. So the shogunate was like, absolutely not. Like, they're never coming in, blah, blah, blah. However, an official, I think reporting to the emperor at the time, which it was like a king prime minister kind of deal, an official decided like, no, we should let them in. So they did, and they let Perry in, and they said, and that's where he said, like, I'll be back in a year, whatever. So when they came back a year later, the shogunate at this time had continued to unravel. There was a few more deaths, and there was a very small and sickly boy shogun. You know how it is?
Yep.
All wars start with a small and sickly boy.
That's correct. And essentially, they surrendered to the naval fleet and were forced to open trade routes and negotiations with the United States. And this would lead to an open borders treaty in 1854 between the two countries. So this led to a rapid influx of foreign trade, which completely bottomed out the already struggling economy. And the massive surge of traders, of course, brought their diseases like cholera and all of the other ones.
Yep.
And all of the other ones.
And all of the other ones that you've heard of in the Secret Garden.
Cholera et al.
your favorite diseases.
Yeah, pick your favorite Renaissance era disease. Go. So ultimately, the shogun would end forever when Japanese citizens finally rose up and just straight up began murdering shogun officials and also any Westerners alike. This was the period of the masterless samurai called Ronin, which is Image 7. Oops, that's just Jeremy Renner in Endgame.
It's not even a picture of Jeremy Renner in the Ronin.
Yeah, it's just Jeremy Renner.
It's just Jeremy Renner.
It's just Jeremy Renner. So, things were pretty bad in Japan, and Western powers responded in kind to these assassinations, and it was made very clear the struggling Japanese state could not stand up against the powers of the West, be it the US, Europe, whatever. So in 1868, this led to the new Emperor Meiji rising up and taking over from the shogunate forever. And this gave way to the period of time called the Meiji Restoration. Following the civil unrest, Japan was united. All of their various domains, city-states, whatever, what have you, united under one unified Japan and was divided out into 72 prefectures, which is still the dividing lines that they have today. So now we're in 1868. This next period is called the Meiji Restoration, and this is the rise of the Japanese Empire. So with the Meiji Restoration came this period of rapid industrialization. This was Japan catching up with the rest of the world. while the rest of the world had their own industrial revolution. We also saw a unified Japanese language and just generalized modernization. So again, eschewing a lot of the traditions of the past. This also happens to be, we talked about Demon Slayer. So this period of like pre-World War I was, again, kind of like their roaring 20s. And that was the period of time depicted in Demon Slayer.
A couple Miyazaki films too.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where we get a lot of the like the idyllic Japanese countryside, the return to, this is a period of rampant nationalization.
The most probably like Western touchstone for people would be like the Avatar: The Last Airbender, with like the episodes where like the Fire Nation take over a old air temple and modernize it or something. Like that's imagery evocative of this era.
Got it.
I think that's fair. So when it comes to religion, this was also the major move here was to unite under one monotheistic version of Shinto. So this was called state Shinto or Koka Shinto. Now, again, I want to bring up that central concept where we've got religions that are focused inward. You yourself can become a god. This new state Shinto was very much taken on the backs of Western religions like Christianity, where it said, no, there is one God, and this God is the emperor, and he is our God emperor, our God king.
There is the God, not a God. It is the God.
We are not gods. We serve the God.
And it was the distinction from like traditional Shinto is the former belief. Traditional Shinto believed kind of everything has a divinity to it, and the Koka Shinto changes that to like, yes, everything has a divinity to it, but only the emperor is God. Yeah.
So as it goes, this really, I mean, this catapulted Japan to become a major power. They were able to catch up. They were able to quickly industrialize, build up their economy. They saw this huge period of prosperity during the early 1900s up through World War I. And then this nationalist, super zealous government continued to grow and, continue to conquer outside of its borders and would eventually ally with the Nazis and create the Axis powers in World War II, which we all know how that ends. So following the end of World War II, in 1947, as part of the peace treaty with the U.S. after their surrender, the U.S. actually forces Japan to ban Koka Shinto. So Koka Shinto, state Shinto, was effectively rewritten in the new Japanese constitution. And this was a major request from the U.S. because this was considered to be like a unifying. I mean, this is their manifest destiny, essentially. Right. So as a result of that, we see a post-war Japan just completely decimated from World War II, both economically and physically. Japan, as a result, becomes very secular. And at this time, many completely outright shun or avoid organized religion entirely. Now, we see Shinto, as we know it today, kind of come back, but it's more of a tradition, a philosophy, and less of a I worship blank.
It comes back through superstition more than anything.
And folklore and all these things. In its place, then, as everyone knows, they're in a power vacuum. Something needs to rise to the top, and in its place rises what is possibly the most corrupt and sinister religion ever known to modern society. A god without a face or a name, but one just as cruel and vindictive as any. And that god is capitalism.
That's the pitch for the game Andrew's developing.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about capitalism.
All right.
Yay.
Fucking sentence.
Are you itching for a good story? Laughter among friends, maybe even a mystery or two? Well, you're in luck. Fire Breathing Kittens is a standalone Dungeons & Dragons podcast. Each episode is a separate 3-hour-long story, like a movie for your ears, so you can listen to these adventures in any order you like. So, join us on a real play D&D quest as we solve mysteries, attempt comedic banter, and enjoy friendship. Fire Breathing Kittens podcast. Fantasy, action, mystery, friendship.
All right, we are back. So, to summarize before we broke, ancient Chinese religions influence ancient Japan, who then adopt the ideals of Buddhist self-enlightenment and ascension. The ruling class wields these tenets to gain power and then get usurped by the Shinto shogunate. The shogunate's rule is eventually crumbled by Western influence and is eventually overtaken by the god emperor of state Shinto, who adopts this Western-inspired version of Shinto. The emperor grows and modernizes Japan, but this hunger for more and more rapid growth leads to Japan's alliance with Nazi Germany and is taken down once again by the West. Following World War II, Japan then becomes increasingly secular and outright shuns organized religion entirely.
Andrew, when in this summary did Tom Cruise come to Japan and show everyone that they just needed to believe in themselves and could overthrow their oppressors?
Believe it or not,
Last Samurai reference.
It was the Last Samurai reference.
Yeah, it is, John.
Oh, God.
So, believe it or not, Tom Cruise was on the boat with Commodore Matthew Perry from Friends. And
Fantastic.
that's why they made the beer based on his exploits in the East. Good question.
I've been trying to jam a Last Samurai reference in all episodes. So
Well done. All right, so let's talk about the modern era. So following World War II, Japan's economy, like I said, was decimated. So the next 10 or so years are really just focused on reconstruction in every sense. Foregoing the tenets of imperialism, state religion, and any variation before it, they instead adopt Westernization by going all in on both democracy and also conspicuous consumption.
Democracy in heavy air quotes.
Yeah, in heavy air quotes, unfortunately. So, throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Japan quickly rises again as a major economic power. They do this through intense deregulation of antitrust laws, which see the rise of keiretsu, or Japanese word for massive conglomerate corporations.
Oh,
I didn't know there was a word for it.
Terrible word.
I didn't either.
Oh, it's a shitty like Six Sigma like business concept.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Six Sigma.
Yeah, so speaking of, let's talk about the 6 keiretsu that rule Japan. So these are 6 megacorps that emerged as the dominant economic power across the whole country. You've got Mitsui, which is MITSUI, Mitsubishi, you've probably heard of before, Sumitomo, which I have heard before in the pharma world, Fuyo, Sanwa, and the Daiichi Kangyo Bank DKB Group. These 6 megacorps represent corporate interests in literally hundreds of fields, and it is why, very explicitly, why we have that joke that Yamaha makes pianos and motorcycles, or why, and I'm not kidding here, Mitsubishi makes cars and washing machines, but is also the 7th largest bank in the world in terms of assets, that is just under Bank of America.
It's why Nintendo started as a playing card. They started making playing cards and quickly expanded into every other type of game.
That, yes, but that actually is a result of the oil crisis. I want to point out, so it's related. We'll get there. I want to point out image 8 here, which is not a sexy image, but it is a list of all of the horizontal keiretsu of Mitsubishi.
This is overwhelming.
It's got
there's a lot of words.
30 Rock vertical integration energy.
It's vertical integration as fuck.
This feels a lot like the graph that's like, did you know that 3 total companies control every piece of food that goes into your mouth?
It's the same thing.
Every piece of music that comes out. Yeah.
I was gonna cite when Matt learned that 3 companies rule the world, and this is the exact same fucking thing.
Andrew, have these 6 megacorps been characterized as monsters anywhere? That seems like something...
You're reading ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, we're gonna get to that. That's why I brought up Final Fantasy VII, because Final Fantasy VII is a great example of all of the main antagonists of the modern era.
I was gonna say, having 6 like very specific mega corporations emerge feels ripe for artistic interpretation. Let's say.
I mean, we were literally talking about this in the break, but like, why do you think that the Japanese-inspired Magic the Gathering series is cyberpunk?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, okay. So let's move on from this horrible image. Now, in effect, capitalism becomes Japan's new religion through the mid-century. And this is a major difference between us and the US and Japan, right? Because we still had Christianity as like our culture and as our kind of singular God. Now, granted, like you could argue that the Christian God represents capitalism, but like, we're not getting into that today. So this is a much more like obvious and not subtle false God, essentially.
Right.
So we see this, and again, like it works out, you know, they once again, they rise to a massive superpower. There's a surge in wealth and prosperity that continues through the 70s. The oil crisis of 73 briefly impacted the economy, as it did here, and tanked the value of the Japanese yen. But the country very quickly pivoted toward leading the world in electronics, which I would posit is Nintendo is an example of that. Again, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but that was like a very common trend was in the 70s and 80s to pivot toward electronics.
Yeah, that's where the whole like vaporwave aesthetic comes from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you get this rise in pop culture as well. Things that are, you know, Tokyo pop is a great example of things that are inspired by the West, but are still inherently Japanese. And we get this, you know, this creates the fantasy of the neon lit futuristic paradise that we see in like Blade Runner and stuff, right? However, by 1990, the promise of everlasting prosperity under daddy capitalism begins to reveal itself as a lie as the economy took a nosedive once again and kicked off to what is now known as the lost decade. So this is 1990s. Now, by this time, an entire generation of Japanese citizens had been conditioned to live for work. This is where we get the stories of Japanese workers working 12 to 16-hour days, sleeping at their desks, right? They don't have a 40-hour work week like we did at the time. And Todd knows this, but the classic joke from Earthbound is that Ness, the protagonist's dad, exists only as a telephone and sends him money.
Yeah.
Because his dad was a wage slave. He's working all day and all night.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when you think about Japanese culture, this conditioning really does begin in childhood, where as a kid and teenager, you know, they go to school 6 days a week. And yeah, they have breaks, but they have like smaller 6-week breaks in the summer and the winter instead of the long summer vacation like we do. Students also like they have to participate in a bunch of extracurriculars. They're training themselves for 16-hour days because your only free time is sleeping at home.
I remember this was brought up a lot. The move to year-round school, quote unquote, was popular when we were in middle school, and this was brought up as an example of like, well, Japanese kids do this, and I remember thinking, man, that sounds like hell.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I should also note, so Kyle had mentioned air quotes on democracy. Japan is absolutely 1,000% on democracy. You can't argue that it isn't. However, there are a lot of parallels to where we are in our political structure today. So it is widely accepted that they've basically had one primary political party in power essentially since its founding in 1955. This is the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, and they are very much like the GOP, save for the insanity, the Tea Party shenanigans, in that they represent conservative values and are heavily influenced by corporate interests. The LDP currently have a majority in the Japanese House of Representatives and had for a while. However, I'll say that their majority has dwindled over the last number of years. That said, though, nearly every elected prime minister, save for like a few, have been LDP, including the current prime minister, Fumio Kishida. So that's why it's like, yes, it's a democracy, but it's very much like there's one singular party in power.
Yeah, they don't even have the like bipartisan.
Yeah.
If you want to use the word like charade that we do, they just have one party that wins every time and another one that shakes their fist at them to.
It's like if the Democrats and the Republicans merged and it was like the Democratic Republican Party and then any independent party. So
I don't want to talk about that reality anymore.
That feels terrible.
You mentioned that it's their hold has been dwindling. I've heard that assassination that happened a year or two ago
Shinzo
was a big sparking of the powder keg of that change. Like that was the hey, we can kill these people. And,
yes. Yeah. And that I didn't get a chance to read too much into that because I was coming up on time. But
sure.
Yeah, from when I read I mean that I think that was so interesting, and it made news not because of the political ramifications, but it was just like, oh my God, somebody got shot in Japan because nobody has guns in Japan. Their gun laws are very strict. There are no shootings in Japan. That was very much like a wild thing. So the political ramifications I think got definitely like swept under the rug a bit. But yeah, Kyle's right. That very much was kind of a powder keg, and again representative of Japan has been dealing with the ramifications of hyper-capitalism for as long, if not longer, than the U.S. has.
It's kind of the, like, not his position, because he was prime minister, obviously, but, like, if someone shot Dick Cheney, like, this guy had the same kind of political leanings and steered the country in a way like Dick Cheney did.
I think that's accurate. So just to kind of put a point on this, we have here this period called the Lost Decade, where the Lost Decade, when it came to 2000, turned into the Lost Decades. And spoiler, it's still the Lost Decade today. And this is a period, again, where people are really realizing the ramifications of hypercapitalism and the fact that, like, the only people actually benefiting from this, from this promised prosperity are the 1%ers at the top of these megacorp food chains, which is where we are today, very much. If you go on TikTok, it's very sobering, but also, again, like good to know that we're not alone in you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That shared suffering.
Culture and the economy stagnating since the 90s. Can't imagine what that's like.
Right. So we don't, I don't want to belabor it, but, just kind of to note here that Japan for years has dealt with these, challenges with suicide, massive depression, isolation, and a lot of kids growing up without that very needed emotional support from family structure and things like that. Why are we talking about Japan's history? What does all this have to do with spiky-haired sword boys slaying gods? Well, at the root of this is the fact that art is almost always an expression of real-world trauma and a very, very politically friendly way to rebel. Right?
Yeah.
So, that's where we get all of the influential anime of the 90s. We've already talked a lot about, like, Evangelion and how that, like, really kind of explored the ideas of depression and isolation. So the Moon Channel video that I watched does a really good job of illustrating this impact through the plot of Final Fantasy VII, which is a very silly sentence, but I'll get into it. So I mentioned it. So at the top, I gave you guys the people of Shinra, Genova, and Sephiroth. So these, as you accurately guessed, these kind of represent all of these very real world influences that shaped Japan's present day today. So the first leg of Final Fantasy VII and the entirety of the more recent FF7 remake is spent in this neo cyberpunk city called Midgar, which is a dystopian Blade Runner nightmare that's owned and operated exclusively by the Shinra Electric Company. Image 9 is Midgar. If you've ever played FF7, this is a very iconic image. Now, Shinra runs the town on this, like, wonder energy, kind of like, think like Iron Man 1, this like amazing, this universal wonder energy called Mako. Mako is revealed to be the literal lifeblood of the planet.
Mako is people.
Mako is people. It quite literally is people. The metaphor is not subtle here. So, Shinra, obviously representing unchecked corporate greed, is using Mako to both fuel and fund their privatized military, but more importantly, funding their secret plans to build a literal promised land where their executives will escape to avoid the inevitable implosion of the planet.
Good.
Cool.
It's
just some good non-political storytelling.
Right?
Why can't games get back to this, guys?
Yeah. We used to be a country.
I tell you what, though, what's wild is that Final Fantasy VII came out 30 years ago, something like that.
99, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the strongest pitch to play FF7 I've ever had. I'm more interested in playing FF7 right now.
Matt
than
is
I've ever been.
Matt is going home today to kill God with the power of friendship.
Hell
one way
yeah,
or
baby.
the other.
We got him. We fucking got him. So
I don't think you actually got him.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
The
We're
bit aside.
do not play Final Fantasy VII, Matt. You'll be sorely mistaken. you'll be in a bad way.
You'll be so sad.
Yeah, watch a video. So after leaving Midgar, the party then discovers the source of Shinra's dark science, which is an alien named Genova who crash landed into the planet centuries ago. Shinra harvested Genova's DNA and created super soldiers, promising, say it with me, a new age of prosperity and wealth, which are brought about by this alien presence. Genova is image 10 here in the Imager library.
I don't remember Genova looking like that.
That is actually from FF7 Remake.
Yeah, I bet. That ties back. That is a corruption, further artistic representation of corruption of their creation myth, because their creation myth is the gods cast something off into the sea, and that became Japan, and it's not gods, it's aliens, but
well,
metaphor.
What is an alien but a presence from another world that's infecting and poisoning your reality.
Exactly. So we took this godlike power, corrupted it, and made it and used it to do more capitalism.
That's correct, Kyle. So finally, we kind of get to the culmination of this, which is in the back half of FF7, that is all focused on the battle, the chase of Sephiroth, Smash Brothers Sephiroth, if you will.
Famous from Smash Brothers, yeah.
Yes, correct. Who is the most successful result of Shinra's experiments with fusing Genova's alien DNA with the planet's Mako. So Sephiroth literally represents the blending of corporate greed and the alien parasitic influence on this world.
Rad, perfect.
Yep.
Amazing.
Cool. Yeah. Is Final Fantasy VII a good game?
Has
it been a good game this whole time?
Yes, Matt.
It's so funny because Sephiroth ends up on all these lists of most iconic villains, and then there's this fun subtext of but really, this is why he's a good villain. What
we're saying is Sephiroth is literally Commodore Matthew Calbraith Perry.
And this is not important to this topic, but just my understanding of Final Fantasy VII a little more. Is Sephiroth a completely synthetic creation, or is there a person and then they pumped these two things into a...
Well, Kyle, to push my glasses up a little bit.
Please do.
Here we go.
Straighten that pocket protector too.
He is the biological son of Vincent, the vampire gun wielder.
Yeah.
Okay. And the otherwise, and the wife or the later wife of Hojo, the evil dark scientist of Shinra. I forget, Lucretia. So Sephiroth was essentially a test tube baby that was born was born in the womb and then extracted and then infused with Genova cells. So he is synthetic and organic.
So there's some Antichrist metaphor going on in there too. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, it's a real pick your poison, a real conveyor belt sushi's worth of tropes here.
We can see whatever we want to see in this mirror.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. Okay, so I want to talk about another one. That's going to be the biggest, the most pervasive one. I've talked a little bit about Persona, but the trope of capitalism as a false god is also, I feel expressed really well in Persona 5, where, spoilers for Persona 5, if you're going to spend 200 hours on that game, the major antagonist of Persona 5 is quite literally a politician.
Everything is always like their dark secret that has
Yes.
to do with like greed or selfishness or whatever
100%.
else that tracks.
Yeah, so the game's final dungeon is in the depths of Mementos, which is a Super Smash Brothers Mementos, which is a represents where it is.
None of us have played that game in 2 years.
I know. So Mementos is a representation of the ugliest desires, as Todd mentioned, the ugliest desires of the consolidated population of Tokyo. And at the heart of Mementos is the Holy Grail, both a very obvious allusion to Western religion, but more importantly, the literal false god that is capitalism. And that's image 11. This is the golden Holy Grail.
It's not subtle. It's just a big Holy Grail.
It is a
Holy Grail.
A massive golden cup. Yes.
So we've got a couple capitalism as the god trope. The alien parasite trope, I think, is definitely the most pervasive. We see it most notably in Earthbound and Chrono Trigger.
What game is that? Second one?
Chrono Trigger,
I've never heard of it.
Famously available on Switch only.
Right.
So Earthbound's Gyges is an alien parasite who secretly influences and poisons the minds of all of the world's inhabitants. Chrono Trigger's Lavos is a source of magical energy that the utopian Society of Zeal attempts to harvest for power, but is ultimately wiped out as part of their hubris as a result. Guys, even fucking Kirby does this.
Yeah.
So,
Kirby?
Fucking Kirby, man.
My pink puffball game isn't free of metaphor.
Everyone's favorite cryptid monster, Kirby. In one of the old Kirby games, King Dedede, a major political figure, is poisoned by the influence of an alien presence named the Dark Matter. In the new Kirby game, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, we meet Leongar. He's kind of like the kind of almost end boss, who was the de facto king of the Forgotten Land until his mind was taken over by an alien from another dimension. That's fun.
Neat.
Yeah. I mentioned a while ago, Dragon Ball was a retelling of an old Chinese novel. However, its sequel, Dragon Ball Z, the big bad of its first couple arcs, is a galactic colonizer named Frieza.
Yep.
Sure. Yep.
All of Dragon Ball Z's are galactic
conquerors, aliens, alien parasites. Yeah.
Cell and Majin Buu are also.
Yep. I mentioned Neon Genesis Evangelion and its explorations in depression and isolation. You may remember, and I know Matt knows this because he watched it, but Neon Genesis Evangelion also uses a lot of Christian themes and references like the Bible deep lore, like the scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Seraphim and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Christianity not an influence in Neon Genesis Evangelion. Hideki Anno literally just said like, I used it because I thought it was cool and weird.
I think that's like how J.R.R. Tolkien denied that World War I influenced his writing of Lord of the Rings at all. He might not have consciously included Christianity for that reason, but it's kind of undeniably there.
It's undeniably there and very much a presence.
Yeah.
So to summarize, to answer the questions, why do we kill gods with the power of friendship? When we kill gods in JRPGs, a lot of times it is not a literal religious god, but rather it is the false god that is capitalism. And the reason we do it with friendship is because we only have each other as the means to fight back against the 1%ers. Friendship, in this example, is the idea of collective bargaining.
Solidarity.
Hell yeah,
Solidarity
dude.
and collective
Great.
bargaining.
We are a pro-union podcast.
We are a
God
pro-union
damn.
podcast. Power to the people, power to the workers.
I wanna
yeah.
jump back because I like the other part of it is that is like part of Shintoism, traditional Shintoism, is that like the everyday deities you encounter are very much killable. And that's where like the idea that we can work together and kill the false god of friendship comes from, because like, well, it is just another, like if you go out and clear the field behind your house, you've killed the field spirit or the wildflower spirit or whatever. Well, we can do the same thing with the false god of capitalism. It's just going to take big anime swords and magic.
If you take one thing from today, go watch Princess Mononoke, because it literally is just what Kyle just said: is don't clear the fields to build iron to make more money, because you will be attacked by an evil tree spirit.
Yeah,
and then go play Final Fantasy VII.
And then go play Final Fantasy VII.
If you pave paradise and put up a parking lot, you won't know what you got till it's gone. Yeah, that's what Princess Mononoke was about. The Counting Crows wrote that movie.
Well, actually, it was Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell wrote that, but yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we tied
Rascal
that all.
Flatts did it for popular children's story with a theme behind it, Cars.
That was
Gross.
Life is a Highway.
That was Life is a Highway.
That's a pro highway song. Todd.
Life is a Highway is absolutely anti-union.
This podcast is pro-union and anti-highway.
No, but the whole moral of Cars is like, you have to protect the world. Fossil fuels are going to destroy it at one point.
Yeah, but that's not what the song "Life is a Highway" about.
I know what I heard.
Life is a Highway is about how cool a highway is.
You know, have you seen Highways? Fucking rad.
All right, that's all I've got for our thesis today. Any parting wisdom? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I want to say first off to you, excellent job, Andrew.
Thank you.
I was, I don't know if the word nervous is the right word, but I certainly wasn't like stoked on the concept of this flavor text. Not in the like, I don't want to do it, but just in like, oh, this could be dense and it might be a lot, but like.
Well, it didn't help that last night I was like, get ready for a history lesson, air horn, air horn.
That's true.
I'll echo that. I was expecting a good 2.5 hour, a good Martin Scorsese length film here, and we got in and out in a like Netflix episode amount of time. So I'm impressed.
This is
exactly how I wanted to digest this. That like you set the stage, then you drew the connections, and that is very, very cool. I like this. It is cool to see you naming properties that like we're all a little familiar with, and being like, oh, that's a cool direct line. Oh, that makes way more sense now.
Right. Yeah. And that's really it. Is like it ties up very nicely with the things that I did know going in and the general just like familiarity I have with the pop culture surrounding these areas. And it's really, like I said at the beginning, you know, what is capitalism if not Christianity and Western imperialism with the scientist Jonathan Oppenheimer?
Yep. You got all three of you were right.
It comes back to a big thing I think about a lot with art, is that like if you can just peel back a few layers of the context of the time, or the context the creator was like making art under, you can get such a richer like understanding of what it is. Like Final Fantasy VII is a fun game about spiky-haired anime boys swinging around physically comical swords, or comically large swords. But like if you peel back just a little bit, you get that like, oh, is this about Mitsubishi? Is this about
right?
Like
incredible.
And that like amazing. Like I think we should all. I would encourage everyone to examine all the art that you love through this lens, because it is all there. However much like the MCUification of it all wants to make it beige paste that has no underlying themes. Like
yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys liked it. Thanks again to our commissioner today at Sharkbait. And thank you all at home for listening to Debate This. You, of course, can follow along with the arguments on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at DebateThisCast, or on our website at debatethiscast.com. And, of course, if you want to commission your own flavor text, head on over to patreon.com/debatethiscast. A one-time payment of $60 will allow you to dictate whatever series, media, or religious doctrine we talk about next. Until next time, I'm Andrew Henderson.
I'm Todd. The Old Testament's way more rad if you replace a talking snake with a talking wolf, dog, panther. Thomas.
I'm Kyle, beige paste, now in gray, Harper.
And I'm Matt, 6 Sigma Tyrannus, Cole.
Shit, that's good. And we're saying thanks for debating with us, and if you think we're wrong, you can come fight us behind the swing sets, nerds.